Yeah.
فكيف تكفرون وأنتم تتلى عليكم آيات الله وفيكم رسوله ومن يعتصم بالله فقد هدي إلى صراط مستقيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون ولا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا واختلفوا من بعد ما جاءهم البينات وأولئك لهم عذاب عظيم.
Without further ado, we'll get started with the lecture, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين يا ربي لك الحمد حتى ترضى اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Want to begin by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this gathering. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all of the efforts put together by the MSA, by the execs, management, all the volunteers, and also for everyone coming out, may Allah accept your endeavors. That was distracting to my lecture, the recitation, because now I want to talk about the Khulafa's the relationship with the Quran. Very, very beautifully recited. What's that mean as well? Inshallah, may Allah accept from all of you. Okay, so the Khulafa Rashideen are rightly titled Al-Khulafa Ar-Rashidun. The way that we want to approach their life is myriad. It depends what the topic is. It depends who the audience is. It depends how long that we have to speak about them. We can go in many, many angles. There are many things that we can discuss. When we're talking about the Khulafa Rashidun, we're talking about 70 to 80 years of history, right? So from the time of their birth till the time of their death. So the eldest one is almost similar to age as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Born 572, that's Abu Bakr, right? And the youngest one, he, as you know, outlives all of them, right? Sayyidina Ali is there for the 23 years of the prophetic era, 23 years while the Prophet is a prophet. Sayyidina Ali is obviously there. He's from the first converts to Islam. After that, he's there as an advisor to Sayyidina Abu Bakr. He's there as an advisor to Sayyidina Umar. He's there as an advisor to Uthman. And then he himself is a Khalifa for about 5 years. So what do we have there? That's about 70 to 80 years of history and developments and movements. So what I had to do was pick and choose certain aspects that I think will be very relevant to us, specifically university students, specifically people who are living in a very diverse environment, and specifically people who are grappling with certain ideas that perhaps are usually painted back to a particular point of history and are discussed. So with each of these four people, I will discuss different things about them, hopefully inshallah ta'ala, to give a broader understanding of what's actually important. Okay, so first off, I'm going to be mainly concerned about their salient characteristics. So let me ask you this, okay? Let me ask you this. Salient characteristic of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. What would you say it is from what you know about him? And there's no such thing as a bad answer. Yes, sir.
It was after the death of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr was the one responsible to end all the tribal disputes and actually prevented a tyrant from taking over the ummah.
Yeah, very good. Personality character that comes from that, Ahmed.
Decisiveness.
Decisiveness. Excellent. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And people usually don't associate that with Abu Bakr. I'm going to talk about why that's so important. Yes. Patience. Sabr. Very good. Okay. So, yes. As-Siddiq. Very good. And what is that linked to? Out of patience or decisiveness or boldness? As-Siddiq. Which one do you think ties into more? As-Siddiq. Here's the thing, okay? We're going to talk about this. This is really interesting about Sayyidina Abu Bakr. One of the things that he's noted for, and when I give you some examples, it's going to become glaringly obvious, is courage. The salient attribute of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is actually courage. It's not to say that he doesn't have all the other virtues. We're talking about the most salient attribute. So how do we know this? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I offered Islam to everybody, and everyone hesitated, right? Everyone hesitated, except Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr didn't hesitate. When he saw truth for what it is, he didn't think of the consequence of accepting that truth. At his time, at Abu Bakr's time, the people from his tribe, anyone know what tribe Abu Bakr is from? Banu Taym. Banu Taym is not this massive, large tribe. Those are about two of them. Right? It's Banu Makhzum, Banu Hashim, and Banu Umayyah. These are the big tribes of the Quraysh. The tribe of Abu Bakr doesn't have many luminaries. It's a dignified tribe. It's a Qurayshi tribe, but it doesn't have high-ranking political officials. It doesn't have that. And for him to take on the Prophet ﷺ side immediately without thinking of the consequences of him becoming a Muslim in early Meccan times was something that requires a lot of courage. Yes. Now, at the time of the Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Aisha reports the hadith that she says, I was at home when this happened. The Prophet comes into the house and he says to clear the house. So Abu Bakr says to the Prophet, no one else is at home. It's just me and my two daughters. This is Asma and Aisha. That's it. No one else is there. And the Prophet said, yes, this is fine. And he says, it has been given. Permission has been granted. So he says, for hijrah? He says, yes, for hijrah. Then all he asks him, As-suhba ya Rasulullah? Do I get to accompany you? The Prophet says, yes, I get to accompany you. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr starts to weep. He starts to weep. This is really interesting because Sayyidina Aisha said, I've never, ever witnessed someone weep out of joy. I've never seen someone weep out of joy. It's the first time in my life. Because she was a young girl at that time. She's like, I've never seen someone weep out of joy. What is he weeping for? Let me put this for you. There's going to be a bounty placed on the prophetic head, right? Whoever captures him, dead or alive, is going to have 100 camels awarded to them, right? This is a suicide sort of mission. If, of course, this is divinely guided, so we know that nothing's going to happen. But from the observable reality, what's going on here? Abu Bakr is really happy to put himself in harm's way for the sake of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? This is going to be a very turbulent journey, and we know what happens at Thawr, right? When they're in the cave, we know what happens. And yet Abu Bakr is happy to put himself in harm's way for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. That requires courage. Okay? An action that Abu Bakr is known for is what? Generosity, correct? Now, If I'm afraid about what's going to happen with me and my family, if I give my money away, would I ever be generous? If I'm afraid about if I give this money away, what's going to happen to me and my family? Would I ever give money away if I'm a coward? No. Yeah. So generosity is actually an offspring of courage. Courageous people are the only people who can be generous because they're not afraid of depravity if they're deprived. It's not an issue to them, right? They've overcome their fear of not having, so therefore they're able to give. And with Abu Bakr, this is more than anything else because he's known to give everything, right? And the Prophet did. Anas says the Prophet would use Abu Bakr's wealth as if it was his own. I want you to imagine this, right? The Prophet would use Abu Bakr's wealth as if it was his own. There was no filter between him and Abu Bakr with regards to these things. And I'll give you another example about this. In Mecca, before he became a believer, Abu Bakr would have around 40,000 dinar. This is a mini fortune, right? Even in today's standards, by the way. 40,000 gold coins, a mini fortune, Abu Bakr's wealth. Before Hijrah, he barely had 5,000 dinar. Now, were there any battles going on in Meccan times, in the 13 years in Mecca, that the believers had to fund campaigns? Any real estate being bought in Mecca? What was happening in Mecca? Where is his wealth going? You guys don't know the answer. Where is his wealth going? Yes, sir. Very good. He used to free Muslim slaves, right? He used to free Muslim slaves. That's where his money was going. And his father didn't have a problem with him purchasing slaves. He had and freeing them. His father, who was not a believer, he never had a problem. Can I try it without this? Yes. Let's try it. Well, let me see if I can project my voice. Can everyone hear me? Can we do this instead? Yes.
We can give you a handheld.
Unless you guys are recording the feed. If you're recording the feed, I'll put it on.
You could use this one.
I'd rather move my hands.
Okay. And just speak very loudly.
Yeah, as long as the speaker in the back. Ustad Daniel, can you hear me? Yeah, Ishmael, can you hear me? Okay, so what were we talking about? Oh, right. So from $40,000, from 40,000 dinar, he went to 5,000 dinar in a span of 13 years. And this is not because he was investing the money or he was equipping the army. It was because he was freeing slaves. And who had a problem with that? His father. Not because he was freeing slaves, because that was actually a good thing because you were building up an asset. Freeing a slave in the Meccan period or in tribal times was as if you're just gaining a family member who will do anything for you whenever you ask them. You had walaya with them. That was the whole point of freeing a slave. You know, like, this is your ally. He owes you everything because you freed them. And so anytime you need something, you're being attacked. You want something done. You need someone to go on a trip. You need someone to take care of your fields. You need to take care of your goods. You have someone who will never say no because you sort of freed them, but you still have, power over them. And so Abu Quhafa, his father, Abu Bakr's father, was not a believer. He would say, why do you free these guys? Because free quality people, our issue with them is like, these are the weaklings, right? They're not some strong Arabs or young people that we can use in times of crisis. Like our family doesn't benefit. Banu Taym, our tribe, doesn't benefit when you free people like these. It has no benefit. And Abu Bakr would always respond to them that I'm not freeing them for the tribe. I'm not freeing them for the tribe. And you guys know the story when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu goes to free Bilal from his master Umayyah ibn Khalaf. He demands for 7 uqiyah. 7 uqiyah is a lot of money. And simply put, Abu Bakr, without negotiation, pays him 7 uqiyah. And as he is taking Bilal radiallahu anhu out of that place, Umayyah says, if you had negotiated, I would have dropped it down to half. Right? And he said, in another riwayah, he said, he's not worth 7 uqiyah. So when you overpaid. That's what he's saying. You overpaid for him. And Abu Bakr says, if you had doubled it, if you had asked me for 100 dinar, I would have paid you 100 dinar. Meaning I didn't lose out in this transaction. You did. You could ask me anything. I would have given it to you. because his value to me, you don't understand. Meaning you're the loser here in this transaction. Don't you get it? You had the opportunity to become a millionaire. Yeah, you squandered it. You didn't think, because the value for Bilal in the sight of Abu Bakr was not 7 uqiyah at all, right? So that is Abu Bakr. That's what he did with his wealth before he had any idea that there was going to be a Medina where one day he's going to be the Khalifa. Yes, no idea about this. This is just a struggle phase. And he took everything and he put it towards Islam, right? That's Abu Bakr. And you cannot do that unless you have courage, right? Then what about when the Prophet ﷺ passes away? The day that he passes away, Sayyidina Anas says it's the most drastic and heavy day on all of the city of Medina. Our happiest day was the day that he came here. Our saddest day was the day that we buried him, right? No one is in their right mind. Everyone is in shock, right? To the point where Sayyidina, you guys know, Sayyidina Umar was in a state, right? He was making the announcement that the Prophet, just like Musa went to meet his Lord, the Prophet is gone, he'll be back. Anyone who says otherwise is going to have to face my sword. This is just Sayyidina Umar's reaction to what's happening. And at that time, keeping it very, very real, and keeping it cool, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he wasn't there when the Prophet passed away. He was on a trip. He comes back straight to the house of IHM where the Prophet was. He kissed his forehead, and he goes out and he quells everything down. And he says, whoever worshipped Muhammad, know that Muhammad is dead. If you worshipped Allah, know that Allah is al-Hayy al-Qayyum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never experiences that, right? And then he quotes the verse of the Quran that Muhammad is not a son to anyone. He's not a father to anyone. And if he was to die, are you going to turn your backs? And Sayyidina Umar said, I heard that, and it said, as if the first time I heard that verse, he had heard that verse before, but it just hit right. And that, by the way, so it shows you the sagaciousness of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, which verse to use at what time, right? I told you, I heard Abshir recite in my head. I was making a calculated decision. Should I just talk about how the 4 Khulafa are connected with the Quran and their relationship with the Quran? That'd be, by the way, an awesome lecture topic to give to someone, to do some nice research about that and bring that up, because every single one of them is intimately involved with the Quran, and they've made huge contributions to the field of Quran and Quranic studies. Every single one of them, all 4 of them. That would be a cool topic, but that's not our topic today. So, salient feature of Abu Bakr, which one is it? Courage. And how do you know it's courage? Well, in times of calamity, the person who holds their ground, correct? Someone who's able to stand up for the truth. So where does he get his title from? You all know the story. He gets his title because the Prophet goes on his night journey, right? The Isra and the Mi'raj, comes back, informs the Quraysh that he's done this, and Abu Jahl gets wind of it, and he says, hold on a second. If I was to call all of your followers and told them, are you going to say the same thing to them? That in one night you went to Jerusalem and back? The Prophet said, yes. And so they started to roll with laughter. This was a field day for the antagonists of the Prophet in Mecca, because this is absurd to them. He's claiming to go to Jerusalem and back in one night. Yeah, let's see how many people believe that. So Abu Jahl is going around the city of Mecca, announcing this to all the Muslims. He runs into Abu Bakr, who hasn't met the Prophet yet after the Isra. He hasn't met him yet. And he says to him, do you know what your friend is saying? So what he's saying? He's saying in one night he went to Jerusalem and back. And Abu Bakr responds with just the way that Abu Bakr can. He said, if he said it, I believe it. If he said it, I believe it. And by the way, this is a creedal statement for us, correct? Isn't it? If the Prophet said it, then we believe it, because he's someone who saw the Amin. And so what happens? The Prophet hears of this, and the title is given to Abu Bakr as Siddiq. Sayyidina Ali said, I have heard the Prophet you say this title for Abu Bakr many times. As-Siddiq. Right? And what does Siddiq mean? The one who affirms the truth regardless of the consequences of it. And what character is that? If you affirm the truth regardless of the consequences, you can only do that if you are a courageous person. So next time, for all of us, when we think of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, the most salient characteristic of Sayyidina Abu Bakr that should come to mind for us should be courage. And we see this not just in his early part, not when he was just with the Prophet in Medina, but also when he's fully in charge. When the Prophet passes away, you guys know that it wasn't as if, our understanding is generally that everyone, whoever accepted Islam at the time of the Prophet was completely sincere. Right? Tribal society did not work like this. Right? A lot of the conversions at the end of the prophetic life by these major tribes were political conversions. They were conversions of necessity. They didn't even know anything about Islam. Their tribal leader converted to ally with the Muslims, so the entire tribe converted. And so as soon as the Prophet passes away, what happens to all of these tribal leaders? They renege. They break their contracts. And the very next year, when it was Zakat season and the tax collectors from Medina went to their villages to collect taxes, they said, we're not giving taxes to you. Our allegiance was to the Prophet. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He's no longer there. So these guys had not left Islam, but they've left a pillar of Islam, correct? Zakat is a pillar of Islam. They haven't left Islam, they left a pillar of Islam. And at that time, there was a discussion that started in Medina. The discussion was, what do we do here? Do we aggress upon these people? Do we get them in line? Or do we let it go and we'll deal with this later because the Prophet just passed away? There's going to be turmoil. There's going to be some tribulations if we do this. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr is very clear. He says, you cannot separate Salah and Zakat. You can't do that. You can't pick and choose with Allah's religion. You can't play games with this. Yeah. And they didn't ally with the Prophet, they allied with God. Meaning when you accept Islam, you're not allying with the Prophet. You're making a covenant with Allah. And part of that covenant is Islam holistically. You know, we have to choose. It's like, okay, so I'm never going to do Hajj. So I don't agree with that. But the fasting stuff is cool. It's very healthy. So, you know, I lose a good amount of pounds if I fasted. But the Hajj thing, that's a lot of money. So I'm not doing that, but I'm doing this. So this pick and choose business, that's what was happening. And for the right reasons, right? They thought that the Prophet has passed on. There's going to have turmoil in their leadership. And so we can get away with a lot of these things. And so what does Abu Bakr do? He says, you cannot separate the Salah and the Zakat. You don't get to leave off a pillar of Islam and still proclaim that you're a believer, right? And so there was a declaration of war against all of these tribes, which were not just, it was some village, by the way, that did this. It wasn't a region that did this. It was the bulk of the Arabian Peninsula, right? It was the bulk of the Arabian Peninsula. And so in his time, there was very less expansion of the Muslim empire because he was dealing with the aftershock of the death of the Prophet. So he's the great stabilizer. So politically, I want you guys all to think that Abu Bakr's 2.5 years were about political stability. It was about the foundations and the grounding that shook as soon as the Prophet passed away, right? It shook. And so his job was to stabilize it, like when a mountain stabilizes an earthquake. So think of the Prophet was passing away as a political earthquake in the Arabian Peninsula, and Abu Bakr, the mountain, which made sure that it doesn't create any serious damage for long term. And therefore, we don't have repercussions of the death of the Prophet, by the way. We don't, because Abu Bakr was there. The religion never changed. It could have, but he ensured that it didn't, right? Because that's his political role. So when it comes to personality, what did we say his glaring trait is? Courage. I can give you another example of courage, right? Before the last few days of the Prophet, before he passed away, he had assembled an army that was supposed to go to the Roman Empire, right? Because he had already started with the Battle of Mu'tah. The Muslims had already started engaging with the Roman frontier. They had already started that. And before the Prophet passed away, he put in a contingent army, a significant army. And the leader of that army, he made Usama bin Zayd, which was strategic because in the last altercation with the Christians, his father had been killed as a shaheed, right? You guys know this, right? Zayd radiallahu anhu, Zayd ibn Harith, he was martyred at the Battle of Mu'tah. So his son was supposed to be the general here, right? You guys understand why a political mind of the Prophet, the genius of the Prophet, why he would do this, correct? Who is going to be very passionate in this battle? Right, Osama bin Zayd, his father was martyred by these people, right? So there's this strategic sort of placement of Osama as the leader. But apart from that, this army was set to leave Medina. The Prophet passed away before the army could head out. And so there was a discussion in Medina. Should we let go of all of these soldiers and leave the city of Medina vulnerable? Because right now our enemies know that we're struggling. We just lost our leader. And he's not any leader, right? He's the guy who talks to Jibreel. So it's a prophet of God that we lost. Irreplaceable. You can't replace a prophet, right? You can replace leaders. How are you going to replace a prophet? It's not possible. So the understanding was, well, what we're going to do is we're going to keep the army here. That was the suggestion. Multiple people gave him the suggestion, including Sayyidina Umar. Says, we're going to keep the army in the city because this is a time that we're opening ourselves up to attack. If we let go of all these young soldiers out, if someone takes advantage and says, well, they're weak right now, they just lost their prophet, they just lost their leader, we'll take advantage of this, right? And a lot of people were going to do that. Sayyidina Abu Bakr says, no, the Prophet intended for this army to leave, and who am I to put a spanner in a prophetic plan? But that's not my position. And despite of contrary opinions, Sayyidina Abu Bakr sent that army through. And when that army passed through the Arabian Peninsula, word got out from tribes, even the Ghassan tribe that was going to attack the Muslims, word got out that these guys are so powerful right now that they're able to send an entire army to fight the Roman Empire. Meaning it was the exact opposite effect that people were thinking that is going to happen. People were thinking that if we send this army, then we'll be more vulnerable. It was the exact opposite, because sometimes your best defense is offense. And that was the genius of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, right? And yes, sir.
Would it another aspect that by showing that they're still going ahead even though the Prophet died, is kind of a way to show that they're still going to go strong? Or?
Yeah, there's still stability, exactly, right? That they're not caving in, they're not showing weakness. It's the opposite, right? So that's Sayyidina Abu Bakr. And from him, what I wanted us to extract was his courage as a personality. And what can we say about his political career? What was his job? To stabilize. Okay. Then we get to Sayyidina Umar. And perhaps the most glaring, so this was easy. By the way, he was a Siddiq, correct? And we said you cannot be a Siddiq except that you are courageous, Shuja'a. And then I showed you all the examples or some of the examples from his life where Shuja'a is obvious. It's clear that he's courageous, right? Sayyidina Ali, by the way, said, I saw with my own two eyes Abu Bakr at the Battle of Badr, in front of the Prophet, on the side of the Prophet, on this side of the Prophet, defending him as if he was a lion. So we think of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as some, his physical description is that he was skinny, he was shorter than Sayyidina Umar. His physical description is of not someone you'd expect with a sword, not someone you'd expect on the battlefield, making sure that no harm comes to the Prophet, becoming his shield. But that's the reality of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, right? Anyways, so people of faith, they have their ibn waqti, which means they have in specific times they know exactly what to do. In times of war, they are like fursan, they're like knights. In times of worship, they're like worshippers, like hermits, sages. Okay. Anyways, let's get to Sayyidina Umar. What is his title? Al-Faruq. Excellent. Okay. What does Faruq mean? Yes, Osama.
Yeah, I think I may be mistaken, but differentiating between what's right and wrong.
Oh, very good. Differentiating, right? Right? To make a different, to differentiate between truth and falsehood. Okay, so that's it. That's his salient characteristic. His salient characteristic is justice. That's it. That's what he's known for. Adil, right? He's the adil. That doesn't mean he doesn't have courage and he doesn't have generosity, right? I don't want anyone to misunderstand this. It means that's his salient characteristics and it permeates his entire life, even when he was not a believer. Why did he, many people had different reasons for trying to kill the Prophet. He had his reasons. What was his reason? His reason was, what was his job prior to becoming a Muslim? He was a diplomat. He represented the Quraysh when it comes to other tribes. He was a spokesperson for the Quraysh. That was his job, right? And so not just his tribe. Which tribe is he from, by the way? Anyone know? Yes. Adi, Banu Adi. Very good. And another tribe like Thaym. So this is not from the three big ones. You should know your Arab history if you want to know prophetic seerah well. The three big tribes are Banu Umayyah, Banu Makhzum, Banu Hashim. Right? Banu Thaym, his tribe is not a big tribe. Right? Abu Bakr's tribe. And then Umar's tribe, Banu Adi, is also not a big tribe. Right? But from his mother's side, who was he? Does anyone know? From his father's side, he's from Banu Adi. Does anyone know from his mother's tribe who he was? Does anyone know who his mother is? His mother? Yeah. Very good. His mother's name is Zainab, but who is she? She's the sister of Abu Jahl. He's Makhzumi from his mother's side. His maternal uncle, right? Mamu, right? His maternal uncle is who? His maternal uncle is Abu Jahl, right? And therefore, Sayyidina Umar is actually involved in the early tortures of the Muslims. That's what it's like, a family business from his mom's side. That's what they do. All right. And here's the thing: people had different reasons why they were attacking the Prophet. You know what his reason was? It was a justice-based reason. You saying that I want to return Mecca to its glory, meaning we've been fragmented. Right after this man has started saying all of these things, the youth have been confused. You know, you guys feel that sentiment sometimes, right? The youth are confused. They're not on the hop. Right? That's what his argument is. His argument is that this is messing up our youth. We need to take care of this, and the best way to do it is to get rid of the source of the. Because the other thing we'll learn about Sayyidina Umar, he's very practical. Like even when he's a Khalifa, he wants practical solutions to things, right? He didn't want theoretical solutions. Like I'll give you an example of this. When the city of Kufa is being developed, remember, the city of Kufa did not exist. The Muslims took that land, conquered that land, and created the city of Kufa, which is going to become the academic hub for like 300 years or something. But it didn't exist. At the time of Sayyidina Umar, when the wars with the Persians were quelled down and the city of Kufa was being erected, he sent Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. And Sayyidina Umar used to use Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas to set up governments, to set up cities, and then move him to where he was needed again. That was his job. In Sayyidina Umar's rule, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas used to go set up places as a governor. And when things were running smooth, he would go to the next place, then fix that. And that was his job. He was a master politician, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, great governor. The people of Kufa did not like him. They didn't like him at all, right? They thought he was too strict. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas is a warrior, right? They thought he was too strict. They didn't get along with him. And so Sayyidina Umar said, okay, I'll send you someone else. And he sent them Ammar ibn Yasir. Okay? But here's what he does. See, I told you he's very practical. He said, with Ammar, I'll send with you someone I don't want to send with you. I'll send with Ammar someone I want to keep here with me because he's indispensable. But I am choosing you, O Kufans, over me. And I'm sending with you Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Because he understood that the issue of the Kufans weren't government, it was knowledge. If they were very bright people, if they were occupied with knowledge, they wouldn't create a lot of problems on the political front. So he sent Abdullah ibn Mas'ud there and to busy people up with the Quran. And that's why, till date, out of the 10 qira'at that come to us, 4 of them come from the Basra and the Kufa area. And partly because these types of companions were sent there to teach people the Quran. Right? So he's a practical guy, Sayyidina Umar. He's a practical guy. If there's an issue with a governor, he fixes it right away. Right? And he listens to the people. Anyways, Sayyidina Umar is known for what? Again, what is his salient characteristic? Justice. Okay. And justice means to put things in the right place, correct? Okay. So you guys all familiar with the hadith, right? The Prophet said if Sayyidina Umar was going down one way, then who would go the other way? Shaitan. Why? Because shaitan is all, this is something that you should know. Ibn Hajar talks about it, that shaitan's main ploy is to get people to put things where they don't belong. In dhulm, right? That's what his main ploy is, right? So it's time for prayer. And the ploy of the devil is to make sure that the window of prayer is missed, because then you didn't pray where it should be prayed, right? That's the whole point. The devilish ploy isn't some evil sort of conspiracy. It's little acts of deviances, which then grow as a character, right? That's how it works. And Sayyidina Umar is all about being the Faruq, making sure there's a differentiation between haqq and batil. And this dua that I recited at the beginning, and this is one of my favorite duas that I recite all the time. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqa warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batila warzuqna ijtinaba. Oh Allah, show me truth as truth and allow me to follow it. And show me falsehood as falsehood and give me the courage to refrain from it. This is Sayyidina Umar's dua. It is attributed to the Prophet, but authentically we know that it goes back to Sayyidina Umar, right? Because that was his whole life. Some things we don't know about Sayyidina Umar that should be known, by the way, that are very, very important. Sayyidina Umar was the one who gave the suggestion of the Quran to be compiled in one book form, right? And Abu Bakr initially did not like the idea because he didn't want to do anything the Prophet didn't do, right? And so he rejected the idea. And then Sayyidina Umar kept pressing it. And eventually it made sense that yes, we're losing a lot of people in these battles. It's good to try and bind this. At least we have a state copy. That was not meant to be like a community copy. It was meant for in case of emergency. It was an in case of emergency copy. It was a state copy of the Quran. But whose idea was it? That was Sayyidina Umar's idea. And here's another thing about Sayyidina Umar. He's considered in our tradition mulham, people who have divine inspiration, right? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens their hearts to certain realities, right? And so there's an entire tradition of that with Sayyidina Umar. There are at least about 7 things where it appeared to him that it should be done that way. And when he said it to the Prophet ﷺ, the Quran agreed with his states, with his verdict on things, right? So his alignment to the truth was on the Sirat al-Mustaqim to such a degree that the kitab, which is on Sirat al-Mustaqim, the Quran, will be in concordance with some of the suggestions that he's giving out. That's how fine-tuned his understanding of what the Sirat al-Mustaqim is, right? So that's Sayyidina Umar. And the most glaring thing about Sayyidina Umar, by the way, is of course his conversion story, right? And there are certain things that we don't know about the conversion story that I'd like to highlight, right? First of them is Sayyidina Umar was not anti-Islam. His Islamophobia was slightly different. His Islamophobia was because it was messing up the Quraysh. It was messing up his city. He wasn't anti-Islam per se, to the point he didn't even know the main arguments that the Quran had to put forth. He didn't. And as soon as he got exposed to the main arguments that the Quran had to put through, he accepted. He had no problem with it. He actually said, this is the thing that Farra Quraysh, this is the thing that the Quraysh are running from. Like when he heard the Quran properly, reflectively for the first time, he said, this is what the Quraysh are running away from. What a loss. Like they don't get it. He never took Islam seriously. Right? Until, of course, as you know the story, he went out of his house one day after a lot of tribulations in the city of Mecca, and he wanted to end it all by getting rid of the Prophet. He was doing that out of justice. Believe it or not, he was doing that out of a sense of justice. And when he left his house, there was someone from his tribe, from Banu Adi, who had accepted Islam, who saw Umar walking with a sword, and he said, what are you doing? He says, I'm going to go and end this fitna. And he says, do you know that your sister, and of course, the reason he's telling him that is not to get his sister in trouble, so that he has enough time to run to tell the Prophet that Umar is coming, right? But to give him a heads up. He said, do you know your sister, Fatima, and her husband, Sa'id, they've accepted Islam? And Sayyidina Umar says, that can't be the case. Anyways, he goes to his own house, his sister's house, and he hears the Quran being recited from outside, and they were being taught by Khabbab ibn Arat, who was also from the slave class at that time. And as he barges in, Khabbab jumps and he hides, right? And Sayyidina Umar then starts to interrogate. He finds out that they have accepted Islam, and he starts to physically pounce on Sa'id ibn Zayd, who's from the 10 promised Jannah, by the way, early companion. And Fatima, she tries to intervene, and he slaps her across the face. In one riwayah, like he punched her across the face. And so she started to bleed. And as soon as he saw his sister bleeding, he completely stopped in his track, right? And softness entered his heart. And then he starts to investigate. It's like, okay, what were you reading? Show me. And she said, we can't. You have to be in a state of tahara. So, you have to go and do ghusl and then come back. So he gets into a state of tahara, comes in, starts reading. And Sayyidina Umar, you should know about him, learned how to read and write as a young child. And that's why the Quraysh would use him as a diplomat, because he could read and write, right, fluently. And so he starts to read, and what was the surah that he started to read? Surah Al-Taha. You know why that's really important? Because Surah Al-Taha begins with the story of Musa alayhi salam, and according to a riwayah, it has some weakness in it. The Prophet said that the most like Musa from my ummah is Umar, right? Which is really interesting that was the conversion passage that Umar got exposed to, was someone who resembled his personality and character. Because guess what we know about Musa alayhi salam from the Quran? He can't stand injustice. He can't stand injustice. The Quran has many epochs of that, many epics of a snippet into the life of Musa alayhi salam, where some injustice is happening and he won't have it. He won't stand it, and he'll intervene. And then he gets in trouble for intervening too, by the way. But he just can't help it. That's the nature of Musa alayhi salam. So he's at a distance. He sees some young girls trying to get their sheep some water from the well, but there are people around the well, so they can't go, and the men are pushing each other. And he sees this and he says, things don't add up. So he goes in, doesn't talk to them, take their sheep, moves everyone out, because he can do that, because he was a big guy, gets them water, brings them back. It has nothing to do with this. He just intervened in a complete strange town in front of strangers because he can't stand injustice. Right? In another place in the city why does he leave Egypt? Because he intervened, right? An altercation between a Coptic soldier, between an Egyptian soldier and someone from the Bani Israel slaves, right? He intervened and he got in trouble for it, and one person ends up dying in the altercation, and that's why he had to flee. But the point is, Musa is very similar to Sayyidina Umar in character. And so it's interesting that was the first surah that Umar read. Anyways, what about his expansion, right? The expansion time of Sayyidina Umar. What was the glaring detail that you remember from him? So politically speaking, so remember we're taking two approaches here. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, when it comes to his personality, what's his more salient characteristic? Courage. And what is his political role? What did he do for 2.5 years? Stabilize. Excellent. When it comes to Sayyidina Umar, what was the most salient attribute we looked at? Justice. And even if against his own family members, by the way, right? There's so many, I can go on and on about the justice of Sayyidina Umar, right? And his justice was such that he said, if a dog is deprived in my lands, then Allah will ask me about this dog, right? So his sense of responsibility, right? The Muwatta of Imam Malik, there's a narration where Sayyidina Umar he doesn't know that this is being overheard, but it seems like he's just talking to himself, and he's reminding himself, oh son of Khattab, if you are not taking care of these things, you are going to be asked by God. He didn't know he was being overheard because it was a garden wall, and so someone overheard him on the other side. But Sayyidina Umar is known for this. He's known for putting the burden on himself, the responsibility on himself, right? Like even the burlap sacks that he would carry at nighttime to give to the needy. His servant said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I can carry this for you. And he asked him a very interesting question. So he's carrying these heavy burlap sacks of wheat and delivering it to people who need it. And his servant says, I can carry that. And he says, okay, are you going to carry my sins on the day of judgment? He says, no. He says, okay, then I'm carrying this because this is how I'm going to get rid of those things. That weight of sin on the day of judgment is going to be removed by this stuff, right? By these good deeds. If you're not carrying my sins, I'm not giving you my good deeds. Like that's not how this trade works, right? So Sayyidina Umar is known for this. Okay, good. What is his political role? And his political role is perhaps the reason why he is so famous, not just from the Muslim perspective, but internationally, right? Internationally. So all the major Muslim countries, in the Middle East and Asia, they were conquered at the time of Sayyidina Umar. Almost every single, like where you're from and your ancestors from, that was the governors of Sayyidina Umar and the commanders of Sayyidina Umar opened those lands. And you can pretty much be sure of this, right? You can pretty much be sure of this. So Iran, places like Pakistan, in that time there's no Pakistan, it's Hindi, right? India, places on the Mediterranean, Turkey, Damascus, all of Persia, right? Persia is not just Persia, it's the Persian Empire. So like 7-8 countries of today, right? Then the Roman Empire, which is not just Damascus, but that entire region, right? Spanning till Turkey, that was all under the leadership of Sayyidina Umar, right? The opening that Allah gave to Sayyidina Umar in the expansion of the Muslim borders is unprecedented in history. In history, no one in about 10 years was able to grab so much land and do it in a way where the natives, people who were conquered, did not get displaced. That's the thing. It's not about conquering lands, and many people who conquered lands before. Yeah, many people conquered land in human history. But to win the hearts of the people that you've conquered, that's something else. So to give you an example of this, right? Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah was the commander of the campaign against the Christians in the north. And when the Muslims had surrounded the main Jerusalem city, and they had sieged it for 4 months, back and forth discussions with the patriarch in Jerusalem, who, by the way, according to Christian history, is a saint. So those of you who don't know, according to Christian history, right, the patriarch at the time of the conquering of Jerusalem by Muslims is actually a saint, meaning he's a sanctified soul according to Catholic doctrine, right? And one of the reasons why is that he ensured that the Catholics did not suffer the conquering. How did he ensure that? Because he communicated documents with Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, and he got confirmation that our churches are not going to be destroyed and our people are not going to be humiliated or enslaved. So all of this stuff happened. And when it came to the actual conquering, he said, no, I don't want to deal with you. I want to deal with your Khalifa. Meaning, I'm not going to give the keys to the city to you. I'm going to give the keys to the city to this man, this Umar ibn al-Khattab, only him. And so Sayyidina Umar got the message. I mean, imagine there's an entire army that's waiting to get in, and they're all waiting for Sayyidina Umar. And Sayyidina Umar goes to his most trusted wazir. Who's the most trusted wazir of all of these guys, by the way? All of them. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Sayyidina Ali. That gives it away, right? Sayyidina Ali. By the way, the Hijrah calendar, that it's not Umar's opinion. Umar agrees with Sayyidina Ali's opinion. That's Sayyidina Ali's opinion, right? Okay, so what happens? Sayyidina Ali says, by the way, Sayyidina Ali made sure that Sayyidina Umar does not travel for any battles. Sayyidina Umar wanted to travel to battles, right? But at Yarmouk, at Yemen, all of these battles, he was told not to go. He was told to stay in Medina. And Sayyidina Ali would not allow Sayyidina Umar to travel out. He said it's too volatile. It's too volatile right now. The borders are being expanded. If anything happens to you on the battlefield, it's not the same as happening to one of the generals. Like the Khalifa on the battlefield cannot get killed because the morale of the army is going to be affected. That was Sayyidina Ali had the military mind, right? So he's thinking at things from his perspective. But when it came to this, Sayyidina Umar asked him, he said, you should go. This is a big deal. You have to leave Medina now. Go get the keys for the city of Jerusalem. This is what the Prophet wanted. And so he goes out, and his system is that he goes with a servant, and his system is that half the time, for a little bit, I'm going to ride on the horse, and the other time you're going to ride, and so we're going to take turns, right? And he was wearing his cloth, which was patched up, meaning it was some royal garment or something. It was a cloth with patches, meaning that it was torn, so it was patched up, and it was Abu Ubaidah says, well, you should have patched it up with the same color at least. Right, when he goes to Jerusalem, he said that you should have used the same color. It's like different colors patching down on it. And when he gets there, it so happens that there was a puddle of mud. He missed it, so he stepped in mud. So now he's got a patched up sort of garment with mud at the bottom of it. And it happens that it was the servant's turn to ride on the horse while they got to the city borders. So that he said, you know what? Yeah, you know what we need. Let's switch. You know, he says, switch, why? It's your turn. It's, yeah, but let's switch because, you know, there's a whole parade waiting, you know, like the red carpet entrance. This is the person who's going to be given over the keys. This is an event for the Christians, right? This is an event. It's a political event. So they've staged it as a political event. And so Abu Ubaidah in the distance sees Sayyidina Umar, and he goes out, gallops him, and says, yeah, Amirul Mu'mineen, can I give you an armor? He's like, well, you can't do a wardrobe change, but let me give you an armor and a helmet. Because he doesn't even have his turban on. He's just, Sayyidina Umar was bald. So it's just a bald man walking with, you know, with his cloth, with sort of patches across and muddy sort of shoes. And he says, let's fix this a little bit, right? Because Abu Ubaidah, he's a military general. He's been dealing with their patriarchs, right? He knows their standards. Their royalty, right? They treat things in different ways. There's a protocol. And Sayyidina Umar is one of those guys, as a Khalifa, he would write to his governor saying, you guys should walk in the streets barefoot so you don't forget where you come from. This is one of this, like, that's his mindset. So he says it, and he says to Abu Ubaidah something that we should all remember and never forget. He says, Allah gave Izzah to us through Islam, right? And if we abandon Islam, then we lose all Izzah. Meaning our Izzah doesn't come from the protocol of royalty, right? Who cares what they think of me? I care what God thinks of me, right? What did Kanye say? He said, I perform for an audience of one. Right? But that's exactly that, you know, whatever he meant by that. That statement is true, right? That statement is absolutely true for a believer that the only person or being, the only being that we're trying to truly impress is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if there are people along the way who are impressed by our trying to impress Allah, that means they're righteous and they recognize good, right? That's what Sayyidina Umar is reminding Abu Ubaidah, that I'm not trying to impress them. You're trying to get me to impress. I'm not interested in that. And so when he gets in there, and they are so taken back, like all of these, the patriarch and his people, right? They're so taken back by Sayyidina Umar. They give him an entire sort of tour of all the holy sites. This is the conqueror getting a full tour by the leader of the people he's conquering. You get a full tour, full protocol, as if he was a Christian bishop who was coming from another land. That's how the Sahaba looked at it. It's like he's getting the same protocol as if he's one of them, right? And so what happens after is that Sayyidina Umar basically leaves that place, comes back to Medina, and you all know how he dies because he made a very interesting dua. He said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, ash-shahada, give me shahada. But that's not the interesting part of this dua, right? You know the interesting part of the dua is, he says, give me shahada in what? Wait, what did he want shahada in? In the city of your prophet, right? Give me shahada fi sabilik, in your path, right? Fi baladi nabiyyik, in the city of your prophet. Okay, so here's the thing. He's asking for martyrdom inside Medina, which is a place that has no war. That's the conundrum, right? How do you get martyrdom in a place that has no war? And so he was assassinated, right? And so he got the status of a martyr, even though he wasn't on the battlefield, right? And he died, so he was stabbed while leading the Fajr prayer. He was stabbed while leading the Fajr prayer, and his main concern after that was not the pain or anything. He grabbed Abdurrahman ibn Auf from the saf behind him and made sure that the salah got finished, right? And then after that, he was alive for a little bit. They try to revive, they try to see what they could do, the medics of their time. But when they realized that every time we give him anything to eat or drink, it just comes out because his stab wounds, it pierced his digestive tract, right? So everything he was eating was coming out. They said that he won't survive for long. And so he sent his son, right, to Sayyidina Aisha in this time. And he said, make a request to Sayyidina Aisha, make a request to her that she allows me to be buried in her home. Now, why does he want to be buried in her home? It's because the Prophet and Abu Bakr are buried there. And he wants to be buried with them. He said, make a request, because the Sahaba don't get buried in their homes, right? There's a graveyard, a Baqiyah, right? There's a graveyard in Medina, they get buried there. He said, no, but ask her if she allows this. And Sayyidina Aisha allowed it. And so that's where he's buried now, right? He's buried with the Prophet with Abu Bakr, right? And she said, Sayyidina Aisha said, I had left that place for me. But if it was anyone other than Umar, I wouldn't have accepted it, right? But Umar is Umar, so that's fine. He can have it, right? So, there's a riwayah that has some historical weakness in its chain, but before Sayyidina Aisha used to go to her hujrah without any covering, because this is her private home, right? And people buried there, the Prophet and Abu Bakr. But after Umar was buried there, she wouldn't do that. Even though he's actually buried, he's not there to see anything. But out of her haya, she would do that. Anyways, so that's Sayyidina Umar. So his political, right, the political way that we want to sort of summarize his political pursuits is with growth, right? Growth. Just like Abu Bakr's was with stability, his is with growth. And the cherry on top, the greatest thing that's happened in his era, politically speaking, was Jerusalem. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free Jerusalem again. So we move on to Sayyidina Uthman. And the way I wanted to cover Sayyidina Uthman was in a very different light. Because for these two, we looked at their characteristics, we looked at all of these things. I can quickly mention the salient characteristic of Sayyidina Uthman. Let's try. What do you think? Salient characteristic of Sayyidina Uthman. Abshir? Kindness? Shyness. Very good. Yeah. Generosity, shyness.
Being calm and mellow.
Very good. Being calm and mellow, right? Where you get shyness from that, by the way, right? Being tranquil. And so his is what's called the iffa, and that's his father's name, Affan. Comes to the root letters of iffa. Iffa means temperance, the ability to hold back. the ability to hold back, right? It's a very powerful trait for a believer, right? وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. And the Quran says, the one who's able to hold back their desires, right? فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. Then Jannah is their resting place, right? If you can hold back, meaning your emotions aren't in charge of you, you're in charge of your emotions, right? So all of us get caught up, right? In certain circumstances, we lose it. We even say that, don't we? Oh, he lost his cool. He lost it. He just lost it there. Yeah, well, people who have iffah don't lose it. They're in charge, right? No circumstance can take them away from their dignity. No matter how angry you make them, they won't lose their dignity, right? No matter how comedic something is, they won't laugh in a matter which removes them from their dignity. Do you understand? Yeah. So he's the one, famously, the Prophet said the angels are shy from him. And that because Sayyidina, it's again, this issue of adl happened, and Sayyidina Umar is going to speak up. The Prophet was sitting with his legs dangling on a well. They're sitting on the side of the well, legs hanging, dangling. And so, because if you sit like that in your long cloth, it's not comfortable. So the Prophet had his cloth up here, his thighs were exposed, right? Then Abu Bakr comes in, he sits on the opposite side, and he copies the Prophet. He sits exactly like that. And Umar comes and he sits on the other side exactly like this. Now, the Bawab, the doorkeeper there, allowed Sayyidina Uthman to come. And when Sayyidina Uthman came, the Prophet moved his cloth and covered his thighs. So again, it's an issue of justice, right? Why now? So Umar speaks up. He's like, Ya Rasulullah, why did you do that? And he said, because Uthman's like, why? Why would you give him this protocol? And he basically, the Prophet said, because the angels are shy of Uthman, right? And this is the quality, by the way, those of you who have daughters or who, inshallah ta'ala, have sisters and cousins, the one you want to get your daughter married to, or your niece, or your cousin, is the one who has the greatest amounts of iffah. They have high level of chastity, right? And this is why the Prophet marries not one, but two of his daughters to Sayyidina Uthman, because that was a very beloved trait to the Prophet about Sayyidina Uthman. Not only does he highlight it, that even the angels are shy of him, not just that, but you know, one of the greatest traits of Sayyidina Uthman is that when he was gone to speak to the Quraysh at the time of Hudaybiyah, right? And he was late, meaning he was held back by the Quraysh. Negotiations were held back. And the Muslims thought that the Quraysh had murdered Uthman. They had killed him. They had made him a martyr. So the Prophet gathered all the Sahaba at Hudaybiyah, at the plains of Hudaybiyah. And he said, we are going to take an oath now, a bay'ah, right? This is called bay'ah ridwan. We're going to take an oath that we're going to fight the Quraysh until death. Why did they take that oath? Because they thought that by the way, killing a messenger is an act of war. In tribal times, killing a messenger is an act of war. Uthman was a messenger from the Muslims. But it wasn't just that. Here's the interesting thing. They all put their hands in, for the bay'ah. They all put their hands in. And the Prophet's hand was there. Everyone was putting their hands in it. The Prophet takes his left hand and said, this one is for Uthman. Meaning he's not here, but I pledge on his, he has so much confidence that if Uthman was here, he would be in this pledge. I'm using my left hand for Uthman, right? And the scholars mentioned, the scholars of Tariq mentioned, like Ibn Hajar and others, that this was the greatest accolade for Uthman, that the prophetic hand is actually used for his bay'ah without his permission. Just like the Prophet used Abu Bakr's money without any filter, right? It was as if his own money. He had enough confidence in what Uthman would do. And this is why, so here's the thing. This is important. Sayyidina Uthman has allegations against him. Yeah. And this is one of the people who assassinated him. He was assassinated in this house. The people who assassinated him had certain claims against him. None of them were Sahaba, by the way. Not a single Sahabi, not a single one was involved in the assassination plot of Sayyidina Uthman. For obvious reasons, they know who he is. They want to mess with someone like that. The accusations against him are very ridiculous. They are. But we should know as believers how to defend accusations against the people of God. It's actually really important to know that. Because are those accusations in some circles still exist today? Yes. The accusations against Sayyidina Uthman still exist in circles today. And we'll talk about that, I guess, when we talk about Sayyidina Ali in a bit. But here's the thing. He was accused of a few things. One of the things he was accused of was mistreating Ammar ibn Yasir. Okay? And did that happen? Not by him. Ammar ibn Yasir had political differences with Sayyidina Uthman. Political differences. So once he went with Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas to his door, he said, we want to talk about this. He was already in the meeting. So he says, no, you're going to have to wait. Right? So the Bawab, the doorkeeper, went and said to Ammar ibn Yasir and Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, he's busy, you guys have to come back. So Sa'ad said, okay, let's go. Ammar said, no, I'm not leaving until we talk this through. And the Bawab was someone who was not, he didn't do the right thing. He took his stick and he hit Ammar ibn Yasir, right? And that became an issue because, like, how dare Sayyidina Uthman allow this to happen? And so he was asked about that. He said, I had nothing to do with that. I didn't tell him to do that. That was wrong what he did. And were there future tensions between Ammar ibn Yasir and Sayyidina Uthman? Absolutely not. Actually, when he was accused of not being generous, can you imagine? Sayyidina Uthman was accused of not being generous, right? And so one of the things that Ammar said in the masjid of the Prophet is that, how do you guys put that together? He was the one who bought us the well, like the well that Medinan water comes from, that's from Uthman. Yeah. But he was accused of things. He was accused, most importantly, does anyone know what he was accused of? It's a long list. We can't do all of them. Yes. Nepotism. He was accused of nepotism, right? That he put Banu Umayyah. Now, he's from Banu Umayyah. Uthman is from Banu Umayyah. This is a major tribe. Lots of people, lots of individuals. He was accused of allowing Banu Umayyah key governmental positions and for giving them a lot of money. So a person from his tribe, right, Ibn Abi Sarh, who was a commander of the Egyptian army when Egypt was expanding. The first commander, everyone knows, the Fatih of Misr, who's he? Amr ibn al-As. The second, the one who expanded is this person. He's from Banu Umayyah. He's from the family of Sayyidina Uthman. His name is Ibn Abi Sarh. And Ibn Abi Sarh, interesting person. We can't get into his study a little bit. However, what's really important is that he was given 4% of all of the goods from those battles. That's a lot of percentage, right? That's a lot of percentage to give to a commander. And he was accused of allowing this to happen because he was his family member. And Sayyidina Uthman responds that, how much does a Khalifa get from a conquest? And this is khumus of khumus, right? The Khalifa gets 1/5 of 1/5. Any math students here, what's 1/5 of 1/5? 4% is 1 over 25, right? 1/5 of 1/5, 1 over 5 times 1 over 5 is 1 over 25. That's 4%, correct? Okay, so Sayyidina Uthman said, that was my money, but I don't need it, so I gave it to him. So what is he doing? Is he doing anything unjust? Is that grounds for accusation if he gave someone 4%? No, he gave his cut over to his family member, right? Then they accused him of giving a lot of money to Banu Umayyah. And Uthman says, what do you want me to do? Shouldn't I give to my family members? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? How is this an accusation? I'm giving my money. I'm not giving state money. I'm giving my money. Then they said to him that you prayed 4 rak'ah in Dhuhr at Mina. It's supposed to be 2 rak'ah. And in all fiqh positions, it's 2 rak'ah, by the way. But Sayyidina Uthman would pray 4. So Abu Bakr would pray 2 at Mina. And Sayyidina Umar would pray 2 at Mina. Sayyidina Uthman would pray 2 for a long time. In the last few years he was alive, he prayed 4. And so he was asked. And he says, because I feel like I'm a muqim of Makkah. He had property in Makkah. He says that I'm a muqim here. I'm not a traveler. That was his position. The vast majority of scholars, including all 4 madhabs, they actually say, no, even if you have things in Makkah, then you pray 2, right? So there's ikhtilaf on this issue. But these were the things that they were accusing him of. What was the real reason? Ibn Kathir says the real reason why the new states, these are like frontier states, conquered states, like Egypt, right? Parts of Egypt and parts of Iraq, parts of Iran. Why did they have a problem with Sayyidina Uthman? Because his governmental policy was very productive. And a lot of richness was coming into the ummah. And these people were leaders before Islam conquered these lands, and they had no access to all of this. And the Muslim governors had access to all of this wealth. So it was a lot of jealousy, and it was a lot of, if you guys weren't here, all of these goods would be ours. So they wanted a deal where they were Muslims and they got all the perks of being a Muslim, but they didn't want to take authority from the Muslims. And that's why even after Sayyidina Uthman, did these guys stop giving trouble to the Muslim leaders? No, they continued, because the issue wasn't Uthman. The issue was something else. The nepotism claim doesn't make sense. Like, as Ibn Taymiyyah and others mentioned, the nepotism case doesn't add up. And the reason why is because Banu Umayyah is the largest, one of the largest of the Qurayshi tribes. So number proportionality will suggest that the governors will be from the largest group. That's how numbers work. Meaning if in this room, this is pretty much poised half-half, right? Or it's a little bit more men than women. But imagine if in this room, there are 80% men and 20% women in this room, right? And I was giving out slices of pizza. Who would get more slices? But that's unfair. It should be equal, right? No, absolutely not. Basic proportionality, right? If the majority of the Quraysh, a vast bulk of the Quraysh are Banu Umayyah, then, and the Quraysh are put in government leadership positions, then who is going to be more in government positions? Banu Umayyah. Not because of nepotism, but because of numbers and proportionality. And apart from that, Sayyidina Uthman was asked this, and he point blank said, I never was unjust to anyone. Meaning it wasn't like two people were applying for a spot, and here's a person who really deserved it, but I put my cousin instead. That's not what happened. It never happened that way, right? Anyways, that's Sayyidina Uthman. What I want you to remember from him is from his personality. What do we say about his personality? So temperance, self-control, temperance. And with the political reign, his political reign was filled with turmoil. Okay, so what is his position? His position, what he concluded, and this is what he died on, is that I don't want any Muslim blood being spilled because of turmoil in my Khilafah. And so he called off all of the guards who were protecting him the day before he was assassinated. He called all of them off. He said, no, because I know they're going to attack. And if they attack, you're going to defend. And when you do that, Muslim blood is lost. And I don't want Muslim blood to be spilled because of me. And that was the position he took, right? And so when the people who attacked him, the assassins, they got into his house, there was not a single person to stop them, because he himself as a Khalifa had told all of them to back off. That was the position he took. So his political stance was a stance of sort of Muslim pacifism, which is Muslim blood doesn't have to fall, right? Yes.
Sorry, were the assassins caught?
We know who they were. Let's put it that way. I know that's not the question, yes, but that's complicated. But we know who they were. Like, we have their names. Okay. They'll be caught on the page. It's okay. Okay. The fourth caliph, right? Sayyidina Ali. Okay, this one is going to be easy. Let's see if you guys figure this out. His personality. Yes.
Fair and just.
Okay, justice. So Sayyidina Umar's personality. Yes. Wisdom. Excellent. Hikmah. Right? He's known for wisdom. I kept telling you this though throughout my time here. Told you who used him as a wazir, right? Who used him as their advisor? All of them. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, they all used Sayyidina Ali as their advisor. Like, why? What one characteristic would you want in your advisor? Wisdom, right? By the way, when Sayyidina Umar went to Jerusalem, who was the impromptu, so the Khalifa? Sayyidina Ali was. He put Sayyidina Ali in charge of Medina and all the affairs of the Muslims while he was gone. And who did the Prophet leave in charge when he would leave out? Sayyidina Ali, right? Sayyidina Ali was usually put in charge when the official leader was gone somewhere or doing something. That was his role. And Sayyidina Ali is known for wisdom. And that's why out of all four of these, who narrates the most amount of tafsir? Sayyidina Ali does. Who narrates the most amount of fiqh? Sayyidina Ali does. Right? Whose opinions in fiqh and tafsir and all of these things we take? Sayyidina Ali's. Because he's actively teaching. He's actively involved in the community with passing on the wisdom tradition that he gleaned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? There can be a lot of things said about Sayyidina Ali, and I'm officially out of time because this was supposed to be finished by 6:30 and then the Maghrib just got in. But there's a couple of things that I want us to remember about Sayyidina Ali. Hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, that will help. Okay, Sayyidina Ali is someone who, as a very young person, right, as a young person, understood that for you to go ahead in Islam, sacrifice is part of the step, it's part of the process. And how do we know that? Because Sayyidina Ali was asked to do the most difficult of things on the night that the Prophet ﷺ was planned to be executed, right, assassinated. He wanted Sayyidina Ali to be on his bed instead, right? Although that riwayat has some weakness, there's so many other instances where we can see that the Prophet relied on Sayyidina Ali to take charge when it came to spilling of blood, right? So at the Battle of Badr, there were 3 duels that preceded the actual battle. While one of the duelists from the side of the Muslims was Sayyidina Ali, right? At the Battle of Khandaq, at the Battle of Ahzab, one of the duelists from the sides of the Muslims was Sayyidina Ali, right? Why? The Prophet would often put Sayyidina Ali up. He would often put him in the front. And there are 2 reasons for this. Number one, he was from his family. So that the other people can't say, oh, look, the Prophet puts other people in harm's way, like other tribes, and his own tribe, he sort of, he doesn't push them. Their blood is weightier or more worthy than the blood of other tribes. You can never say that about the Prophet, because who would he put up all the time in all these dangerous situations? Sayyidina Ali, which is from his own family. That's number one. Number two, something that we don't remember is that Abu Talib was actually not a businessman who was very successful. The other uncles of the Prophet were very successful businessmen, right? Like Abu Lahab was a very successful businessman. Abu Talib, for whatever reason, Qadr Allah, was not very successful. And he had many, many children. And so when Sayyidina Ali was born, because the Prophet had already married Sayyidina Aisha, Sayyidina Khadija, who was very wealthy, the Prophet took Sayyidina Ali in his own home. And so although the Prophet doesn't have boys that survive maturity, he actually raised a few boys. So we can see the prophetic tarbiyah in these people as if they were his sons. And Sayyidina Ali is one of them. He was raised in the prophetic household, right? He was raised with the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore one of the advantages, anyone recognize that? That's my wife. If my wife messages, then that's what happens. Because I know there's a situation. Right? Okay. Point B, what's the correct topic?
None of the boys.
Oh, yes. The Prophet didn't have sons he had 3 sons, but none of them reached maturity. So we don't know the tarbiyah of the Prophet. Like, what was his parenting? What was the result of his parenting? Okay. Well, especially when it comes to boys. The daughters, we know, right? The Fatima, a good example of that. Her biography is very well preserved. It's just not very lengthy because she passed away as soon as the Prophet passed away, in about 6 months, right? But Sayyidina Ali he lived a long time. We know his biography. We know his understanding. We know his attributes. We know his personality. We know his compassion. We know his courage. And that's the product of prophetic tarbiyah. The Prophet raised him. And so you want to see if the Prophet was to raise a son, what would be the attributes of that son? You look at Sayyidina Ali's biography. And so there are 3 things that come out. Number 1, a warrior. Number 2, a scholar. And number 3, a person of extreme political astuteness. Someone who understood the pulse of the people, right? And so I'm out of time, but I hope this was beneficial. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to understand who the luminaries of our tradition is. The Quran mentions that if you want to have faith, which is going to give you in the best of company, then you should have the faith of the Nabiyyin, the Siddiqeen, the Shuhada, and the Salihin. It gives us 4 categories. The Nabiyyin, which no one can be, by the way. We don't choose to be a Nabi. It's not a thing, right? And there's no Nabi after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that category is, the door is shut on that, right? None of us can achieve that or attain that, right? The next one is Siddiqeen, right? And a Siddiq, like Abu Bakr is known to be, is a person who recognizes the truth commits them to truth, and never wavers from the truth. All three components simultaneously. They recognize the truth, they commit to the truth, and they never waver from that commitment. And that's Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, right? So if you want to have sidq in your life and adopt the Abu Bakr model, and that's a challenge I would put to everyone, that we should all try to become as courageous as Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And the reasons why we have these people is not just so that we tell stories about them, it's so that we become them, right? We become these people, or a version, at least a version of these people. So what is Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu known for? He's known for his courage, and he's known for recognizing, committing, and never diverting from the truth. So when truth smacks you in your face, you don't sort of grapple with it. You accept it, you humble yourself, and then you make sure you commit to it fully, whatever that truth may be and wherever that truth may lead you, right? And so those are the siddiqeen. Then the shuhada, and guess what? All of the others were shuhada, right? So Sayyidina Umar, shaheed, died, stabbed while praying the Fajr prayer, right, in Medina. What about Sayyidina Uthman, shaheed, right? Stabbed and killed in his own home by rebels. And Sayyidina Ali, stabbed after he left the salah, after he finished his salah and was going back home, he was found in the alleyway and then stabbed. So all of these people were shuhada, right? And the Siddiq, they say, but Abu Bakr didn't get shaheed status. Here's the thing. The scholars explain that when you're a Siddiq, if the situation demanded that you give your life for the truth, because you have commitment to the truth, you would give your life for the truth, right? So the Siddiq already qualifies as a shaheed. Because the sidq is that no matter what the consequence is, you're willing to submit to the truth, no matter what the consequence, even if it means spilling of blood and your own blood, right? And so our task, people, is that we sort of recognize where we are in our journey of Nabiyyin. That door is closed. Shuhada, the Siddiqeen, the Shuhada, and the Salihin. If we can't be the Siddiqeen and the Shuhada like these guys, at least the Salihin section is something that we should really, really attain for. So who is the Nabi? Is the bringer of guidance. Who is the Siddiq? The ultimate affirmer of guidance, right? The one who lives to ensure that they have full commitment to the guidance. Who is the Shaheed? Who dies for the sake of guidance, right? So it's all guidance. And who are the Salihun? Who try and struggle to adopt as much of guidance as possible. That's our boat. That's our halak, that's our goal, to try and adopt as much as possible of guidance that we can. And then we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to benefit from the luminaries that have passed before us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make them the sources of our inspiration towards good and towards khair. These are people are beloved to Allah, some of them more so than others. I can prove this to you. They're so beloved to Allah, that there's an entire group of people whose theological stance is to curse these guys, right? Isn't it true? There's an entire sect that their theological stance is to curse people like Abu Bakr and Umar. And they, by the way, do they pray? That group, yes. Do they fast? Yes. Do they give zakat? Yeah. Muslims, right? So they do good deeds. And so what happens when I curse someone? What am I giving over to them? They're good deeds. So Allah created a system where there's hundreds and thousands and millions of people who do good deeds and then also curse Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman. And so when they do that, they do all these good deeds and they transfer it over to these people who died about 1400 years ago. That's how much he loves them, right? It's a good way of looking at the theological reasoning why there's the schism between the Sunnis and the Shias. And Allahu A'lam. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Anything good that I have said is from Allah. If there were mistakes in my speech, and if there were reports from history that I reported that weren't accurate, I'm just reporting to you what our tradition has preserved. If there are mistakes in that, then I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. I ask your forgiveness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you guys for putting this together. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase your iman and taqwa. May He make the Quran the spring over your hearts and the sunnah of the Prophet by the lens by all through the world. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.